Hello and welcome to TUC0's Talks. It is 2024. I am excited to be here. I have Heather Wells here. Heather, you want to say hi?
Good morning. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks.
And we are excited to have you here. What a great way to start 2024 and to push through the year. As I've said, and I know I've talked to you a little bit about this, is the start from January really till March. We're going to focus on mental health, making sure that we're right, making sure that we're ready to go for the year, taking care of ourselves and all those types of things. So a great opportunity to talk to an exceptional leader in the enlisted force, someone that I listen to all the time. But before we get into all that, Heather, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your career?
Fantastic. Well, once again, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. I think we chatted about this earlier, but I think to start, I want to acknowledge that I am an original Be All You Can Be enlisting campaign member. You know, they got me for 5 years off the bat, and I retired under the same campaign. So I feel like the full circle has come. I think the other part that is so important is that while I was in the Army for 31 years, I only spent about 5 years really being in an Army organization. You know, my first unit was a TRADOC unit. The second one was a force unit, and I never saw another Army unit until 25 years later. And even then, I came back early. I think it's also important. I know we're going to get into this, but I'm married to another retired sergeant major. We have 3 kids. They're all grown-ups and out of the house. And we have 2 amazing grandsons and another one on the way. So that's the full circle of, like, you know, adult life at this point.
The Be All You Can Be full circle. That's awesome. I do remember that growing up. And so I remember, oh, be all you can be. And then when they brought it back, I was like, oh, all right, we're doing everything again. And but it actually was really good. It was
exceptional.
Yeah.
What got me was all of the Rangers. You know, they had Rangers, they had people, they were doing equipment drops out of the back of aircraft, and people were jumping out of airplanes. And I'm like, oh my God, I need to be there. And I never jumped out of a plane in my entire career, which was epically disappointing.
They always get you with the cool things, right? And then they never show what you do 99% of the time.
Yeah, right.
But that's classic military. And I always say they take everything that's really cool, like scuba diving and parachuting and all those kind of things, and they make them horrible. Like they put all these restrictions and they put all these things on top of you. Jumping out of an airplane is cool until you have a 120-pound pack at the bottom of your feet just driving you into the ground. You're like, oh, why did I do this?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I feel like it tortured me enough that I didn't need to.
So good. All right. So, Sergeant Major, husband's a Sergeant Major. You are all in. And so, what advice do you have for a brand new second lieutenant or a brand new NCO that's taken on a leadership role?
Yeah. There's so much really good advice. You know, I'm going to start with, this is coming on the heels of watching SMA Weimer's discussion about care and why we care. So I think it's influenced this a little bit, but in my mind that it's people first. It's always people first, especially when you're a first line supervisor, when you're a brand new platoon sergeant or platoon leader, that you have to remember that, like, the work is important, and being consistent and being good at what you do is really important. But you also need to understand who your people are, and those secret little talents that your folks have that you would never know if you didn't get to know them. And I think that especially in the community that we've come out of, that those hidden talents, those unknown perks of having that person in your formation is a game changer. And so if you're not talking to your people and taking care of them, you're not going to get their best, back into the mission and into the organization. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah. Okay. I gotta stop you. You're giving too much here for me not to stop. So, oh my goodness. Like, you said something that just made me go, oh my gosh, I've never thought of this. So when you are taking care of people all the time, first thing, I love it. That's what I'm all about. And so, but when you said, especially as a frontline supervisor, I've never really thought about the sort of the triangle of the lower you are, the more invested you have to be with your people. Right. I mean, you always know that and you always think that, but as you start growing toward a higher echelon, you're naturally going to have less influence of people, right? You're still thinking about the people, but you're not invested at that point. And I think that is magical. I think that's something that I have not heard that before. You're probably like, yeah, we teach that in Army all the time. But I think that's critical. And I think that's something that we need to hammer our new leaders to say, you have to be so invested in your people. And it leads to your second point of, because you don't know what you don't know about your people. And you don't know the hidden talents that are within them. And unless you find those hidden talents, your organization suffers. And so what you may think is not doing your job or not doing the important thing of investing people and getting to know people and sitting down with them and talking with them is actually hurting the organization if you're not doing it.
Yeah. It's almost like people think that the pyramid is upside down, like that they have the most influence over people. But if you don't have direct contact on a daily basis, then you're not really influencing them. You may be informing them, but you're not providing that direct influence into the formation. And, when we talk about why is the first line so important, like that's your workforce. That's your entire, that's where people are grinding and they're learning their craft and they're growing. And if you have a great first line supervisor, that it is going to make a career difference. They're going to want to stay because they know what good leadership looks like from the very beginning.
Yeah. Okay. So you did it again. Amazing point. All right. So we talk about, you said inverted triangle. So I'm like, okay. And you think naturally when you rise as a leader, you're going to have more influence. But that's not true at all. I mean, if you just think about it, you have more propensity to change the atmosphere and the circumstances of everyone's job, but you do not have the influence that they have. And so that first line supervisor has to be huge. Now, here's what I will say overall. If you walk the dog in this and you really start thinking, okay, if I influence at the top level and I take my first line supervisors and I pour into them and I set the example and say, replicate and do it. You can do a top down, but that's never going to happen. I mean, just with people, somewhere it's going to falter and to fail. So it's way more important to say, I have the most influence at the bottom and to just pour into your people at that frontline supervisor level. Okay, you've changed my dynamic. I'm sorry. I went off on a tangent. Not what you. I mean, it's exactly what you're talking about. But I just didn't think through it. I just didn't see that until now. Wow.
The other part of that though is like when we start. I think the other part is, I don't know that we think about really investing in people when they are when they're first coming in or when they're first going into like a leadership job. You get PLDC or you get the airman's course or whatever the sergeant's course, if you're a Marine, like, but who's informing them? Are they peers that have the same experiences? Or are you getting someone that's going to be there that's really had experiences and knows good leadership and has had the benefit of both good and bad to pour into them? So I think that in my mind, like, pouring into the first line supervisors is going to make your organization and the Army and whatever service you're in better automatically.
Yeah. And when you started thinking of the different services, one of the things in our world, in the Air Force Special Operations, is they had a Navy course that they would take their junior officer and junior NCO, and they would put them together, and they would both go through the course together to learn how to lead together, and then they would go take. I was like, yes, that's what we need,
right?
So, all those types of things. So, man, we're getting to the good stuff, and we were retired, so this is now good. So hopefully we will be teaching. Okay, so we've talked NCO, we've talked lieutenant. Take care of your people, first line supervisor, and I will stop talking, but you're just invoking all these thoughts. So, tell me, switching gears and investing in people and taking care of people. It translates really good into this, how do we do this work-life balance thing? And, I am probably the poster child of failure in the military on work-life balance. So it's just not my personality. I'm singular focused, and it was so bad. And I think through that all the time. But how do you, I won't say how do you do it right, because I don't think anyone knows right. I think we can be better, though. What techniques or things do you know that work?
I think that the first time in a long time, my work-life balance is actually good, but it took retirement to get there. Because
True.
To your point, like I spent the majority of my command in a community that is always going, that. And in my mind, in hindsight, I could have done a lot more things a lot better had I really been paying attention to it. Because I think, especially in our household, when you're married to somebody who was in the same community and was doing the same things, then there's a common understanding of what happens at work. But the further you're away from it, the less you care, right? And so when you don't call and you're late for dinner, or the exec has to chase you down and say, call home, there's something going on, or whatever it is, that, like, those are the things that we're really bad at. We're so singularly focused on the mission and the people that make it happen that we forget that we should probably offer the same common courtesy to the folks that are waiting for us at home. And and I don't think that it is malicious. I think that it is the fact that they hire folks that are going to give it their all, right? No matter what, no matter what's going on.
Yes.
And I think that that's awesome. I think that probably every wall and every door should have a sign that says, if it's 4:00 and you're not going to be home by dinner, you should probably call home and just be courteous enough to do that. But I think, looking back, it's unavoidable, right? Being late is unavoidable. How you manage that up front is definitely avoidable. So if I would have been walking around with signs on the door that, encouraged me to be more thoughtful of everybody who's waiting for dinner, or waiting to travel to go see the kids, or whatever it is that just a little bit of common courtesy goes a really long way. And we forget that because we get so inundated in the business that is so crucial to to national security, to global security, however you want to characterize it. But it's not diminishing the work that we're doing, and we shouldn't diminish that work-life balance factor either. So I think that in hindsight, I could have done a much better job. There are some things that are just simply unavoidable, though. I think we have to remember that too. Be a little forgiving of ourselves as well.
Yeah, no, and I think of that, and retirement, like you said, has been completely, well, it has completely changed my view on this. So I think now I would leave sometimes at 4:30 in the morning, go to work, and the next time that I text or call is at 7:30 on my way home, when I was supposed to be home at 6 o'clock to make the game, and no call, no text, no anything. And the reason is I'm stuck at my desk looking at this and either working out or doing something that's taking 100% of my focus. And a dang knock on my door by my first line supervisor being like, "Hey, did you check in?" That would all that you have to say. "No, I didn't.
No.
Let me take 2 seconds. Let me go do that real quick." And just to walk outside the skiff, grab my phone, hit the, "Hey, thinking of you," put it back in. What would that have done?
Right.
Over 20 years.
Yeah. Because like any other good habit that we have, that would just be another one, like right in there, right up front, that you're like, okay, we're in this, we're on the road. We're in this together, and this is what I guarantee, that I have built this habit, and I'm going to check in, and I'm going to remember that you're important too.
Yeah. And even now the wheels are turning. I'm like, okay, I'm taking my team on a TDY. We're going on a cast ride. Hey, before we jump in, y'all check in, let everybody know we're there. Take 2 minutes. Nobody grabs their gear for 2 minutes. Go. Golly. So, man, what a great lesson, I think is there. Okay.
We've definitely all learned it.
Just the hard way.
Yes.
And unfortunately,
never the easy way.
And so this is such a life story, is the problems and the trials that you learn from. 99% of the time, it's not you that pays the price of them.
Oh.
It's everyone around you that's paying the price of you having to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Geez, that's crushing. Okay, so I know what I'm doing when I get off this call. I'm like,
I'm going to call everybody. I'm going to check in.
Exactly. That is the title of this, is Check In. Oh man. All right, good. Okay, so we're gonna totally change, and we're not gonna feel bad for the rest of this. We're just gonna move on. So one of the hardest things to do, and I tell people this all the time, the NCO and senior NCO is the hardest job in the military, because you are leading every way possible. You're leading down, you're leading side to side to your peers, you're leading up. You've got these crazy second lieutenants who don't know anything, that want to just take the bull by the horns and go. You've got these colonels that remember how it was, 30 years ago, and don't exactly go. And then you've got these incredibly gifted, brilliant generals that have these great ideas that just need sounding boards, right? So let's talk. We've talked a little bit about leading down. Let's talk about leading up. So I want two perspectives. The first one we're going to go with is, how do you lead a boss who is younger, who has less experience, and how do you lead them?
Younger and less experienced. I think everything has to start with kind of that sit down and tell me about your experiences, or give me your background and, what you liked, what you didn't like, what were the high points of your career, what challenges, what don't you like doing? Because there's something that everybody doesn't like doing, right? What do you love doing? What do you not like doing? What are your ultimate strengths? What's your superpower, kind of thing, to be able to understand. Like, everybody needs to know where everybody is at. You're not going to learn every single thing about your assigned best friend, regardless of whether they're younger or older, but you just really have to, there has to be a personal relationship there, regardless of experiences and time and background. And I think that the easiest way to partner with somebody who is younger or has less experience is to offer insight into, processes or people, or how to manage certain things, and take advice just as well from that person as you would from somebody who was older, or your, a peer in age and experience. Because nobody likes a partner that's going to tell you that you're wrong all the time, or that's not the way that we do it, or that's not going to work. Like those, you still have to be a partner no matter what. Each of you listens, each of you provides perspective, and ultimately the person who is your assigned best friend is in charge, and they will make the decision. And you have to provide enough insight and information. I think, like, just the value of providing perspective is the most important thing you can do, because you're not going to change the dynamic of who's in command and who's in charge.
I'm thinking through, to provide the what are we talking about? How do you provide the perspective?
I think that perspective comes with experience. I think if you're talking about being in combat, or you're talking about personnel manning, something like that. Like, there has to be some perspective behind somebody who has less experience and exposure, and patience to explain it. Patience to say, right? Patience, because that's not something we all have.
Yeah, no. And gosh, that's good. Like, I had not heard that before, and it took me a second to figure out what are you talking about there? That perspective of, that's really not that important right now. Like, there are a million of other things going on that you have no clue about. Like, I have to give you the perspective of what we're doing, and what's the value system in the organization as a whole, and what's the situation of, hey, you may not know it, but this is actually a life-threatening event, because there's other people outside the wire right now depending on this, and you didn't grasp it. Or you think this is a big deal, but it's really not a big deal. Oh, that's so good. Yeah.
Especially, you bring up being in combat, or a scenario like that. There is no greater importance of providing perspective than when it comes to that, because we're out there, we're the people, right? So we're talking to everybody. And so I'm going to come back to you and say, hey, look, this team over here, this is what they're dealing with. And I think that we need to change what we're doing in response because of these factors. The person who is out basically collecting information and sharing information with the rest of the organization, that they don't have time to do. And so that's, in my mind, that's a key role that we provide when it comes to that critical relationship between the commander or the director and your assigned best friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to steal that. So I'm just letting you know, teach the perspective. Like, if you're an experienced person and you're leading up, you have to teach the perspective of where we are and what's going on. Understanding situation, and really that's it, right? You're building their essay, situational awareness that they don't know yet, and building that in. So that's awesome. Oh, golly. I'm learning a ton today. This is awesome.
We're learning so much.
Okay, so we've talked about leading up when we're talking about junior, but now, and I think this is so big in organizations, you've got these mid-level leaders that have a boss that is 2, maybe 3 levels above them that just don't get it. Like they'll go to a meeting and someone will be like, "Hey, can your organization do this?" And you're like, "Oh yeah, I've got it. No problem." They come back and be like, "Hey, I said we do this." And you're like, "You have no clue what you just signed me up for." Right? Like, oh my gosh, like ask me. Take 2 seconds and ask me that before you say yes. So we've all had those, right?
Yeah.
So how do you lead those, not those type of people that do it wrong, but sometimes they're just brilliant and they're coming up with all these great ideas and you're the sounding board off of them. But how do you lead up in that?
I've been really fortunate. I think that there have only been a couple times that leading up was difficult. One, you have to understand where your boss is at. Like, what are the demands that your boss has that you have zero, you have very little context of what, like, my previous bosses are getting from their seniors, how that trickles down and how that influences what they're doing, as opposed to
Right.
what the actual organization is doing that they're leading. And being able to provide that back, like the balance of hearing what he's hearing and sharing what I'm hearing, so everybody kind of knows where everybody's at. And that sounds simplistic, but there's a lot of personality involved in what we did for a very long time, and you have to be able to just convey it as information. It can't be highly emotional and charged. Like, that doesn't do any good, because all that does is get everybody else fired up for maybe the wrong reason. But holy smokes, I'll just talk about the last 2 that I had.
Yes.
Because they were both young. I would say like senior captains and junior majors when I first met them. And then we came back together as the intel team when they were both colonels and I was a sergeant major. And so we had that long history of knowing one another, and that's very helpful. It can be harmful sometimes because you get comfortable and then you don't want to start taking liberties of making decisions that take away your boss's decision space. That's a no-no. The part that I loved the most about working for them was that they let me do what I do. And I provided them as much context and feedback that I could for them to be successful when they walked out the door. And they never had to worry about me not following what they wanted to do in the organization. I was not there to like subvert what the boss wanted. I was there to implement it. And I think that trust right there, like the trust personally and professionally, those things, once you rock that boat and you change that dynamic, then everything changes. Mm-hmm. But as long as you can maintain that relationship and you understand the left and right limits of what you're each doing, then you can kind of divide and conquer very successfully. The other part, and we touched on it previously, but you are the person that your boss gets to be vulnerable with. You can, if that relationship is strong, they can tell you whatever is going on. They can tell you the challenges that they're facing right now, the pressure that comes with what we do and what they do, especially as intelligence folks in that enterprise. It's stressful for everybody. And when you're the pointy end of the spear with the boss all the time, then you just have to be an ear. You have to be a really good ear. Not provide any context or feedback, but be the person that they can sit and they can talk with and share, and they don't have to worry about it going anywhere else.
Yeah. No, golly, that's so good. Like, your job is to lift up, to present the information, to give all the details, and then when they walk out the door, go execute whatever they said and be that positive person. And if you can do that successfully, that's going to open up the communication chain and allow you to get even more insight into what's really happening. And so you can make better decisions and inform them better. And it's cyclical and you can go right through it. I hear this all the time, is I want to be the tip of the spear. I want to be the tip of the spear. And I always say, the tip of the spear is the thing that hits the brick wall the first, right? Like that's what you want to go and just run into a wall. And it's a frustrating time and it's hard, and first man through the door always gets hit. It's just, but if you can lead them and lift them up and develop them and give them everything that you can, and life gets easier. It doesn't get easy, it gets easier.
I love the fact that it gives them an opportunity to be vulnerable where they can never be vulnerable anywhere else. I think the other part, Chris, is that I wasn't just close with my assigned best friends, but with their better halves. And that's what a treat.
Golly.
When we talk, and I'm going to say their names, when we talk about the Conkles and the Skaggs, like great duos, they're all doing incredible work, and they're just good humans. On the backside, they're good humans and good friends.
Gosh, if I had to replay and say what was I horrible at, it was getting to know the families. Like I'm an introvert, and my wife is like the biggest extrovert you could ever think of. And I love it because we'll go to parties and I'll be like, all right, go get them. And I could sit in my corner and she's going to talk to everybody the whole time. And it's amazing. But when you're the one who's in charge of going and making the communications and doing that, and gosh, it's so important. Mm-hmm. It's so important. Yeah, that's part of the leading. And when I'm in the civilian world, and I'll ask you this, in the civilian world, do you see it's the same? Because in the military you have to, right? Like not only is it a checklist, but you have to,
right?
What about the civilian world? Do you see it as much?
I think it's I don't think it's that different from wearing a uniform. Like I think that there are organizations that are probably just exceptional at taking care of their people and developing them and making sure that they have opportunities to meet families and spend time at family events. I believe in my heart that exists. I'm not in it, so I don't necessarily see it every day, but when I talk to people who are in organizations like that, it's not all that different. The services are filled with America's sons and daughters, just like corporate America, just like small businesses. And the way that you were raised is really important. And I think that when we put on the uniform, then we're given our set of values and then we start living them. And maybe there are corporations and companies out there around the world that are doing it in the same way, to create a value system and provide space for people to bring their families into what they're doing.
100% agree. 100% agree. I think the military is better at the civilian world at it, because maybe it's a little bit of a culture when I'm talking corporate, but those mom and pop shops that, man, they're so tight and they're so much better for it. And so we should all learn from them on that. Okay, speaking of the civilian world, what are you doing now? What is your job? What's your focus and your goals here?
Okay, we'll start with my job. I have two jobs right now. Maybe
No
three
different than the
coming,
military. All
right?
right,
No
all right, that's
different.
great.
So before I retired, I set up my LLC. The preponderance of people said, make sure that it's sitting there for however long before you start using it, so it's established. So I did that. And before I retired, I went through the Resilience Building Leader program. And that's what I wanted to teach when I retired. So I'm an authorized training partner to train their curriculum. And then Dr. Coughlin hired me to be his brand ambassador for RBLP. And to be able to advocate for that program, it's almost like advocating for the Army or advocating for the Joint Force, because it's the same things. It's building and leading resilient teams and create a positive climate, organizational change, strategic leadership. And I thoroughly enjoy it. I absolutely love doing it. And those are the primary two things that I'm doing. And then that is what I'm doing for work. Do you want to know what I'm doing when I'm not working?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I think that the topic that we love the most is learning to scuba dive.
Yeah.
And I promised myself in retirement that I would do more and adventure out more that I wasn't able to do, while I was still in uniform, and take those opportunities to spend more time relaxing, more time with my husband, more time with our kids and grandkids. And we're doing that. We're doing it pretty successfully. And I think that has made a huge difference in the transition, because I'm going to talk about that too. The transition from uniform into retirement, it was pretty rocky. If it's not rocky for folks, then I would love to hear from them on how they made it through without a lot of struggle with disconnection. You're not going to the office every day, so routine is out of whack. All those things that made life kind of easy, right? You know where you're going every day. You know what you're doing every day. As a solopreneur, as they call it, not I do whatever I want, and maybe that's good and maybe that's bad, but it's nice to have the latitude. I do love that the most about retirement, is reconnecting with all of our family and doing only the things that need to be done, and then allow for free time, which is something that we're also not very good at.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I didn't ask about this, so I'm totally throwing you on the spot here. How has it been trying to work with husband and that family time when both of you are going through this pretty huge change of life, right? And so I know the timings aren't exactly right, even, but you're still trying to work that void. Was there a constant communication, or was it like, let me just handle my own? Or how did that work?
I think that he could see it. I know that he could see it. And he was pretty gracious. Those aren't words that like I generally would pick for my husband. He's kind of like a bull in a china shop in a great way. But he could see it. He could see that I was struggling. And on a couple of occasions, it was, go see the kids. Go see the kids and spend time with the grandkids. Go do this, go do that. And we started, going together. And then I think that honestly, the scuba diving thing was a huge game changer because that was something that we could both do together.
Yeah.
And, he learned years ago when he was in Panama. And so he got recertified and I got certified. And that is something that I think that our adult lives after service, like we're going to spend time going on vacation and going places where we can scuba dive together because we both love it. And I never would have thought that that's how I would have seen retirement ever.
Yeah. And that's so big. It's, filling the void of what you love to do, and making sure that you grab your family and are pulling them together and going and accomplishing things. And, I talked to you earlier about how, I had some real struggles, and needed to stop and take a break. And I think there's so many of us, and I don't think it's just a military thing. I think when you transition life from one to the other, I think that's a massive change that we all need to stop in. And I was on LinkedIn right before this and was listening to Captain Polson. He reposted something about making sure you're checking in on your buddies. And so just knowing that people are going through a hard time and being able to be gracious, great word, when we're not gracious people overall. That's not what we've been taught to be, but to be empathetic and to understand that kind of situation can have huge positive effects for the people that we care about. So man, that's awesome.
It's remarkable that it takes going through it to be reverse empathetic, right? So you're like,
so true. True.
Like it's an experience that you have to go through in order to appreciate it, to like help somebody else. And until this moment, I had never really thought about like you can't prepare for it because you don't know what it's going to look like.
Yeah. And it's funny. The military they spend so much time and effort in that, right? How are we going to help you with your transition? How are we going to get you through it? Here are the things that you're going to do. But 99% of the time, I'm sure other people are different, but I'm like, I ain't got time for that. I'm in my job mode. Here I go. And then even when I didn't understand it. Like I didn't know what you meant. When I walked away, I was like, I'm done. Like my back hurts, my shoulder, I still can't sleep. Like everything within me is just pain. And so when they were like, are you walking away? Are you sad? I'm like, no, I'm exhausted. It's what I am. So yay, I'm good.
Exhausted, sore.
Yes. So what I didn't know is now 3+ years later, I'm out and I see on LinkedIn, I won't use the person's name because I'm not close with them, but they put a picture of their SF post on the back of a Jeep and someone saluted as they were going by. And the thought in my mind of the bond between now that you're out and how I have that for my special warfare brethren that are still in and still doing it, and I know what they're going through. Now that I'm out, I appreciate it even more. Man, I could not have thought through that 5 years ago. So yeah. Okay, so our 15-minute podcast has turned into 45. You had such great stuff that I was like, no, we're going. We're just going. So this is fantastic. But I do want to stop and say, is there anything that's just on your heart or on your mind right now that you're like, man, I want to take this target of opportunity to speak truth into people?
I think that on a personal note, we moved my grandma down here several years ago. She's 97, she'll be 98 next month. And I compare her to me when it comes to physically, when you start talking about like your physical struggles, taking care of your body, which is something that we just press, we don't stop, we don't go to the doctor, we don't do any of those things. And she was born in the Great Depression, worked on a farm her entire life. And she's as beat up as I am. We are twins when it comes to that. But when you start thinking about like providing feedback to a host, like just, the 1 million person army, stop powering through all of the pain and all of the other things, because you have a life on the backside that you want to live. And if I could have been told that earlier, I probably, genetics aside, I probably would be in better condition moving into retirement had I started actually paying attention and taking care of my body for the long term, not just for the mission or the deployment, but for the rest of my life. And I think that we forget that we have a rest of our life after we take off that uniform. And I am feeling all of it, now. And so I look at my grandma and I see myself, because we are genetic twins. All of the things that are wrong with her are wrong with me. And at 97, she's still pretty mobile. She gets along with her little cart, but she's struggling. And I want to be able to kind of break that mold of just powering through, because that's what she's done the whole time. And there is nothing that you could do more or better for your future than start paying attention to your body.
No, that's so true. Like living, breathing that daily. The interesting part is, in the military, they told us when our dentist appointment was. They told us when our PHA physical was. I don't have anybody telling me that anymore.
Right?
Like
I have to put it on my own calendar.
I have to go find a dentist and make an appointment, but this is crazy, And so I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So, those who are not in the military are like, what's he talking about? Of course you do. Yeah. And so it is a different world, but taking care of yourself, physically, mentally, spiritually, the whole deal, just getting to that, point so that you're right. You're in it for 20, 30, maybe, if you're extremely blessed, 35 years. But then you've got a whole life after that.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully.
And if you took care of yourself, you may actually be able to live it and live it well, like scuba diving and
yes, exactly.
and other things. Well, good. Well, listen, this has been awesome. So thank you. I appreciate that. And so what a great way to start 2024. This will be the podcast of checking in, checking on, making sure that we are good to go. So thanks again. I appreciate you being here. And this is TUC0's Wright. Check it off.